Hi everyone. So I'm just setting up, so I've just kind of got my camera hopefully in a good enough place. Might be better to see the paper. I haven't actually started anything today. I've just sketched out some stonework, some gargoyles, and some bricks. So just mixed up this really muddy grey colour. So to start with, I'm going to do the stonework first. So I'm going to kind of use this dark muddy grey colour to paint the background in, but I'm going to do it quite blotchy. So hopefully I've kind of sketched out light enough that you shouldn't be able to see. If I sketch out darkly, then it'd show through what I was airbrushing. You need like a lot of layers to cover up the pencil. So I've kind of lightly sketched out the shape of the stones I want in the wall. And I'm just blotching in some colour now. So stones are quite fun to paint because you can't do them long. Using blotches which are lighter, they'll come out all right. And the other thing with them is shadows, lights and darks. hopefully you can see this. I know it's quite light at the moment. So these are going to be like a sandstone colour. So I've just put some darks in. I'm just going to put some sand colour in. I'm going to make that up with yellow, a bit of the brown which is already in there, some white. And a tiny bit of red. So I'm just going to do the same again. So I splodged in all the dark colours, and now I'm going to splodge in some of the mid-tones. Adding some more of the red tone in, because I'm going to paint like the plaster which is around it. And that's going to be the typical pink coloured plaster you can see on there. Covered in paint, about 10 seconds into doing a live. Good going. That colour as well, that's hard. Right, so I've just darkened up my pink a bit. I'm going to pick out the dark edges. So if you imagine like the light coming from up here, the dark edges would be underneath where the plaster's broken. So it wouldn't be like on the bottom edge of it here, because the light would actually be hitting that. also painting in a casted shadow on the wall. So, and the other thing is, where the plaster's fallen away, there's cracks in the walls, so I'm gonna add those in. If you're painting bricks, you tend to have nice straight lines, but when you're painting stones, the lines aren't very straight, so to add some character, all your shadows should be a bit wonky. And also the surfaces are uneven, so you get shadows within the stone as well. I'm using like the same colour I used for the dark in the plaster. I'm using for the shadows on the stone. And mix it up with reds and blues and a bit of browns. So just like it's like a dirty brown colour really, rather than just using a black for shadows. If you use black for shadows, it tends to be too harsh a colour. One way to make a wall look like a stone wall and not a brickwork wall is to have different sized stones in it. And where the stone's sitting underneath the plaster, the shadow from the plaster would darken off the edge of that stone. And also if there's any kind of pitted bits or unevenness in the stone, you'd see more of a shadow. So try and recreate that. So by putting that shadow there, it helps you realise that, or helps give the impression that this wall is sat below the plaster line. I'm just going back through, adding some more shadows to my plaster edge and also a few more cracks. Cracks you create like lightning, so it's using dagger strokes. So you want to start with a line and then just let off the air and move towards the paper as you get to the end of it. And if you put a bit of a zigzaggy wavy motion to it, you'll get quite natural looking cracked marks. And just spider it out. It's up to you how many you put in. A lot can look really unnatural, but it can also look just make it look more worn. It's kind of personal preference, how much you want it to stand out. So I have added a thin line of darker paint around the edge, but I'm going to go back over that and lighten it up and just put some highlights, and along the edges of the cracks as well, put some highlights, bring some highlights out of the bricks, because I don't want this line here to look as dark as this one up here. So I'm not going to use pure white for the highlights. I'm going to use a cream colour. So I'll mix up cream, please. Mixing white, yellow, and a tiny dash of brown. that's kind of how I'd do sandstone. It'd just be blotchy. There are other types of stones, so I'll show you that. This one's really fun to do if you're really new to airbrushing. It's really easy. So I started off by thinning down some black, and I'm just going to kind of draw some pebbles basically. You don't have to do these freehand, you could cut out a stencil if you wanted to. But basically, because it's a circular shape, you want the edges to be darker. I've drawn a gargoyle like here on the page, so I'm trying to avoid him. So the edges are darker and they blend in, and you get like a bright spot in the middle. Really easy to do. Don't have to do them freehand if you don't think that freehand is something you can do at the moment. You can cut out a stencil. You don't have to be perfectly round either, you can have the mod shapes. They look pretty much like stones like that, but then what you can do afterwards is, there's lots of different methods to do this, but you cut off the air to the end of the gun and it creates like a speckled effect. So if I get this, if I spray through the gun now, it looks like this. But if I cut off the air, and my favourite way of doing that is by kinking over the airline and then letting the air out until I start getting speckles. Another way, if you've got a gun which has got some kind of valve on it, that'll do it as well. So it just makes it all speckledy. There's other ways, which are getting something and spraying against it so it kind of like that, so that it pulls on the end and then the air forcing past it and creates speckles. I don't like that way. It's kind of like too violent when you do it that way. So I'm going to do it by cutting off the air supply to my gun, by kinking the airline. So if you don't feel like you know where the overspray is going to go, you can always mask up the edges. If you're using a stencil, you can leave the stencil over the top of your stone, and then you won't get like bits of speckledy overspray. Once you've done your speckles, make sure that your airbrush is spraying properly with lice. You'll end up with speckles or bits of paint being fired somewhere on your design. I'm just going back in with shadows. If there's any areas on the stones where the speckles have kind of made their own like little shadowy area, I'll just kind of blend that out with the airbrush. Don't have to do that, but I think it makes it look a bit more natural. So that's the dark colours in on the stones. I've got like a really light grey here. Okay, not too long. Right, now I've got a really light grey. I'm going to do the same again. So I'm going to put some of the grey colour in like the mid areas of the pebbles, and then I'm going to do the spray technique, or the splattering technique again. I don't want this grey on the edges really, because the edges need to be dark. But just kind of whatever colour you put in the stone needs to go splattered on as well. So testing it on the side of the page first. When you do the splatters, they can go to the edge. And again, just blending in some of those areas. So the other stone technique, so we've got like pebbles with the mouldy effect, and then you've got the blotchiness of the sandstone. Suppose if I was going to do red brick, I'd do it very similar to the sandstone. I'd just do more lines. Then, so I'll show him red brick as well. So I just mixed up red and brown. Mix up more red and brown. Right, so yeah, for red brick, I would do pretty much the same as the sandstone. I would do more uniform bricks though. So as you can see already, a lot more uniform. And then what I'd do for the pattern on them is I'd do like the dagger stroke, pretty much what I do when I'm testing out my brush. So yeah, on these ones, all the shadows go in all the same direction. All the details all go in the same direction because these are man-made. Whereas that's natural, and when you get anything natural, it's random. You get things man-made, they tend to be more uniform. So you do get like dark and light patches in the bricks, but are just traveling in the same direction, whereas in the sandstone, they're all random. And on the pebbles, it's just like crazily random. You can put highlights and lowlights in these as well, but I'm just going to leave it at that. So the picture I've got here is I took on a trip over to France, and they've got gorgeous architecture on all their churches over there, and you've got all the gargoyles. So these are proper gargoyles where they stick out from the top of the building, and they drain the water off the roof. So I'm just going to paint one of those, and they're all weathered, so they look pretty cool. So it is a sandstone, which has got like moss on the gargoyles and stuff. So I'm going to start by drawing it out already. I'm going to start by colouring it in sandstone colour. When I put the first layer of colour on, I'm just kind of picking out the middle tones. It's going to have highlights, it's going to have low lights, it's going to have variation in the colour. So this is just kind of like a base layer, a middle tone for it. The roof's actually very orange in colour, but I can use the same middle tone because I can just add the colouring over the top of that. If it was like a completely different colour, starting with this colour probably wouldn't work. But because it's got oranges in it, it'll be fine. So next I'm going to mix up the darker tone, which is kind of, because of the weathering, it's almost a green. So it's like the sandstone colour, but with a green in it. This brown I'm using has got quite a green tone to it as well, so I'll just add a little bit of blue to help it along its way. I don't know how to explain how I mix up colours. It's something I've always done. Not been taught. I've just kind of always, from a really young age, played around with colours. So I kind of know what colours I'm going to get from mixing things up. So this should be the really greeny, weathered colour. I always test them out as well, so if you're ever unsure what you mix up, test it out first. The weathering is kind of sat on all the detail on top of the gargoyles. So most moss colour is. These gargoyles on the top of buildings are like really intricate. They're so cool. If you ever kind of find a Gothic style building, just look up and have a look at the detail in them. They're supposed to be put there to ward off evil spirits. I think the medieval, I think it's mainly medieval churches, Gothic churches you find them on. And a gargoyle is the one with the long neck, and it's normally like an animal or some kind of mythical demons. Sometimes they're people, and basically they were there to channel the water away from the building, because water running down a building destroys the sandstone. So these hung off the building by quite a few meters, and it's just like a water pipe, really, channel the water away from the building. I always thought they were like little statues which sat on a building, but apparently they're called grotesques. So it's a gargoyle if it's got a water pipe, a water spout in it, and it's a grotesque if it's just a decorative face of a dragon or a demon or animal. So obviously moss doesn't collect on the underneath, so only on the top, which I need the feathered colour. So I think I'm going to put some of the lighter colour into the gargoyle, and put some of the colour into the roof, and then I will call that a day for this live, and finish this off another time. So lighting colour I'm going to mix up pretty similar to how I did the mid-tone. I'm just going to make it a bit lighter and a bit more yellow and cream coloured. The yellow I've got's quite bright, so it doesn't take a lot to in fact, all these aqua drop colours, you don't need a lot of them. orange for the roof and a couple of dark tones, just so you can see how the gargoyle's progressing. And then I'll call it a night. So I've got some of the orange in the bottom of my airbrush now, added a bit of black to it, and I'll add a bit of that dark colour we made earlier on. There we go. It's quite thick paint. When you're putting shadows and highlights on, you kind of want it a bit thinner than that. Looks a bit nicer then. So just starting to add in suggestions of where dark tiles would be. And obviously the light's shining down on top of the gargoyle, the underneath of the gargoyle is quite dark. So though I'm putting my darks in, because it's sandstone, I am keeping it quite mottled. Otherwise you lose the stone effect to it. Right, I'll leave it at that for tonight. I've still got quite a lot to do to this. Needs a lot more shadows, a lot more highlights. I've just kind of gone over with another stone coloured base. So it was quite watered down, so it didn't kind of obscure the weathering or the shadow too much, but it just kind of added a bit more colour to it. So it's all about layers. Right, so yeah, I'll leave it at that. We've got pebbles with like a speckledy effect, sandstone, and how to do the cracked plaster look, how to do bricks, and the start of a gargoyle. Thanks for watching.